Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the American Society of Safety Professionals, West Michigan. After this event, we've got a presentation today, and our last one is coming up next month. But let's talk about today. Let's talk about today. I take it, notice I'm not worrying about today. You guys know what day today is?
No. Got it.
I'm trying to hold my pants up.
Thank you.
Properly dressed. Leave them in there, right? Okay, so today we're going to talk about FMCSA DOT updates, that type of thing. We have two speakers. One of the speakers is Brittany. Sure, I got it right. DeVries. Okay, Brittany DeVries. She's also on the executive committee. She serves as the program chair, and she's been with us how many years now with ASSP? Okay, 5 or 6 years. We'll take 6. All right, that works. And you know, to my wing is Matt from FMCSA, and Brittany will introduce him to you guys. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with the program. Thanks, folks.
Good morning, everybody. Some of you may recognize me or my name, but we manage a fleet of about 4,000 across North America. So we have about 1,400 in Canada and about maybe just over 3,000 in the US. So span across like Dallas up to Wisconsin and west or east. Sorry, we're not really out west yet. But, gonna say. So I'm going to introduce Matt. He comes to us with FMCSA. If you guys have any questions toward the end, I'll be able to answer from a board carrier standpoint on maybe something that we do with such a large fleet. And Matt can answer some more technical questions on the radio.
Yeah, my name is Matt with the federal board here, backs here. If there's anyone on the work virtually, whatever, that cannot hear me, right now, I myself can hear. We're just gonna be glad to answer questions and today, I'm always glad to help. If I don't have an answer for you, usually find I'll get you. This is my first time back in person. Brittany first reached out to me, I think, January itch, as well as talking to Tracy about the film. We haven't been allowed to come in person. Obvious reasons for years. But it's great to be back in person like this. I did a few of the virtual ones, and it's not fun. You know, who you're talking to, or if you're talking to anyone, but it's just great to be back here. This setup here is a little smaller than I'm used to, so if and when I'm reading my slide, I promise I'm going to look up to get on your page too. So it's a little different setup. So some things we're going to go over here on the agenda. We're going to go over SMS, the safety management system, or our way of scoring. And keep in mind here, when I come up with an agenda, I'm trying to get out the it's really just have to speak. I was but they need a hot body paragraphs today. I'll be going over there. They'll put some stuff together. But what I'm, you know, what I'm getting at here is the audience is so stuff for right drivers. Process, the compliance investigation process, which a lot of people don't know about because not a lot of companies. We get a very small, or we touch a small portion of the companies in Michigan or throughout the United States. So I'll just explain how that kind of process works if that were to happen. Talk about the portal, the drug and alcohol testing, or the drug and alcohol clearinghouse, the crash preventability determination program, and then just a little more. you have questions at the end. Or anything I do not. So the SMS system, so that's the way we score motor carriers. That's our system that we use. And we use it based off of state reported crashes. And when I say state reported crashes, I mean crashes that are uploaded up into our system, into the FMCSA's data systems, not just like a crash that would happen over here on the street here in Grand Rapids on Pearl Street or something that was handled by the city of Grand Rapids. That's probably, that for sure would be a state reported crash unless they reached out to the state police and the motor carrier division came out and then it got uploaded into the system. All local police agencies, they don't have a way of uploading crash data into our system. So if it's out on an interstate usually, or if it's ever a fatality, or if it's shutting down a freeway, or maybe something major going on, HazMat leak, those are all pretty much going to be state reported crashes. So all of that's uploaded into our system, and then we basically prioritize on like as data comes in. There's a methodology that's actually, you could go and you can look at it and you can read it. It's pretty painful, but there is actually a methodology of how we would score a company based on how many inspections they've had, based on how many drivers they've had. We'll get a little bit more into that. But the SMS is not a safety rating. It doesn't provide Bob's Trucking with a rating that says FMCSA needs to come into this carrier. You don't get you guys maybe have heard of a satisfactory rating or a conditional rating. We'll get into that a little bit, but we do not provide a rating on a company. It just gives scores. That's all it really does. It does not score drivers. It does not score like your specific drivers that might work for you. And there is one key thing here. You'll see third parties that do offer, shouldn't say may offer, they do. I've seen them before. I've heard companies call me and say, hey, and actually insurance companies have it too. They have the methodology down and that's fine. But so they'll come up with a driver score, and it's more for carrier industry, I guess, to decide what they want to do with that driver. It's a problematic driver, but we do not assign any kind of driver scores. The SMS, like I said, the SMS methodology can be found at this website. I can send you the link to also if you ever wanted to look into it. It's not that hard to find where find the actual methodology. It's like I said, a large document. The points are assigned based on violations that they would find on roadside inspections or based on crashes. Sometimes there's a crash that's if it's not a serious crash where an inspection now will take place. Again, that's all uploaded. There's a point value. It's time weighted, and if there's a violation on the inspection or the crash that was with the driver or the vehicle is placed out of service, it adds additional points to it. And here's the basics. You guys are probably all familiar with it. Here's the 7 basics that we do score on. It's the unsafe driving, crash, hours of service, vehicle maintenance, controlled substances, alcohol, hazardous materials, and driver fitness. Now, real briefly, the crash indicator and the hazardous materials is not open for public view. You only can see that the only way you can see that is if you log into your own portal account. You can see that, but anything else, it's all public view. Anyone can go to the SMS website and see any score. If there is scores, a lot of companies don't have them, but they can see any kind of scores. And I know we hear about it all the time as far as brokers. They won't use a company if their hours of service is at a certain level. Insurance companies, it impacts their premiums if they're stored at certain levels. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Methodology, they were changing things. Are they still talking about
So that, and now I know I think that's pretty much got squashed. They're going to redo the whole SMS. I'm sure I know, to put it this way, I don't know of anything anytime soon that's going to happen like that. Right, the way we have it is. But you're right. They were talking about revamping the whole thing.
They heard about it for a while there, and then hot and heavy, and I haven't heard anything.
And I can try to do a little digging for that. If you ever, if you, like, at the end, I can just see if there's any steam with that, if it's moving. I don't think it is, though. Okay? So how the SMS also, how it works here is your total points And again, I'm not gonna break down the methodology of exactly, what your peer group would be, but it's basically so many trucks, if you have so many trucks, then when you do your MCS 150 update, which is basically updating your records with us, how many vehicle miles traveled, you're put into a peer group versus similar sized companies. And then depending on how many inspections you have, and depending on the basic, you guys just have to, trucking company gets 1 or 2 inspections. You get calls about it all the time. My driver just got stopped. Look it up. That it's their second inspection in 24 months. They have a total big 4 violation. Good sized company, 25 trucks, stuff like that. It's not going to impact you one bit. I promise you, we're not going into your company because of that inspection. So it's got to be a pattern, and it's got to be. It's going to happen regularly. You start seeing inspections happen regularly where there's some of the same violations. Now you're going to start seeing percentages in your case. That's where we may take a look at your company. The actual threshold, or the actual bottom number that we're looking at usually is 65 to 75. And the reason that why it varies there is because we have HazMat companies are graded differently than passenger carriers are graded differently. They're held to a little higher standard. But you see, and you don't even have to keep track of that. If you log into your system and you have scores, there's going to be a big yellow triangle right next to your basic score if you're above that threshold. So, it'll tell you in there what the threshold is, but you will know if you have a big triangle that says you're above that threshold. So SMS scores, the reason why they're important, that is the most common reason. That's the most common reason we would go into a company and take a look and do a compliance investigation. I run numbers, I don't know, probably every 2 to 3 weeks, just to check on scores and see where companies are at. And we have prioritization lists. We have lists that our system just prioritizes right for us. It does the work for us. And it's all based on your data. And then another thing is that insurance companies, brokers, shippers, they use it all the time. They do use your SMS scores. I know brokers will not use certain companies based on their scores. Motor carriers that are out in the industry that have drivers that are being regularly, that are regularly running over the road. They are obviously, as you know, accountable for all of your drivers. When I used to go into larger companies, I hear it and then I kind of start saying it's like babysitting. You have thousands or hundreds or whatever you have out on the road. They're usually across the country a lot of times. And you're here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, trying to babysit them and tell them what they can and can't do. But what they do and what they don't do also affects you. So it's really hard. You got to give the drivers some freedom, but also we need to know that we are accountable because what they do impacts us as a motor carrier. So the SMS score is over a 24-month period. And again, as the inspections and as the data gets older, it holds less weight. It's not going to impact your guys' percentages as much. Carriers do not inherit. If you hire a driver that worked for multiple companies that had some inspections for other companies, you don't inherit those inspections. You don't inherit those violations. None of that. It's the driver you're hiring. And I'm going to get into something here shortly about why you want to look into that driver. But you do not take on any past inspection, crashes, or anything that any driver that you want. And the roadside data, again, is it is a part of, actually, that's for the driver. It is a part of the driver's record for 3 years. And that's just the roadside. And then any crashes that driver has is a part of their record for 5 years. And when I say record, we go on to the, actually, it's right here. So this right here, this program called the PreImplementation Screening program, that's just specific to the drivers. This is something that you guys would want to run when you hire a driver. And I put, check this. I was reading it this morning. I'm supposed to take that up, so I'm supposed to check it. I can't remember if it's $10 still or not. But if there is a charge to run this, the driver can run this anytime they want for free, just to see what's on their record. But you guys as motor carriers, or I know insurance companies do it too for a carrier to see who they're hiring, see who they're about to insure. You can do this and you will get the history of a driver for 3 years on inspections, maybe 5 years for crashes. Now, again, that doesn't, because you hired this driver, they're not going to impact your score. But if you are hiring a driver, you see that history of or a logbook not being up to date or something with their equipment, especially if it's an owner operator. Usually owner operators have the better equipment to take care of the truck, but you can see them destroying company trucks, stuff like that. That's just something you guys want to think about, and it should play a role of who you hire. Not required though at all. There's nothing you say you have to do this. We don't require it. Do it if you can, and if you like to, it's just something that's available. Yeah, if you want to. Well, this is another program that we have. And I guess it kind of goes hand in hand with the SMS and maybe the pre-employment screening, because drivers can do this too. So data queues is a program where if you guys aren't checking your roadside data, or you see some data that you don't agree with, or it's inaccurate, a lot of times, majority of the time, any of this inspection, any of the data or any inspections, input by a human on the side of the road. All it really is. Someone that put the wrong DOT number in and it happens off by a digit or something. So you're going to want to be checking, and I can show you in a couple slides of where and how you can check your data. You always want to check your data to make sure it is accurate. There might be some inspections that don't even belong to you. It's wrong driver, wrong piece of equipment, everything. But there's also sometimes where you just don't agree with the violation, or it could be an hours of service issue or something you maybe wasn't right. A medical card issue that just wasn't right. You can go into data queues and you can challenge it. And you'll get a response from data queues. It's not immediate. Usually it's within a couple of months you'll get a response, but you will get a response that says A or nay, or it'll tell you why. And it doesn't mean it's the end. Sometimes you can get the answer and then you can, oh, I need data. So as soon as they say no, you're taking a violation, that's not the end all. Oh, we talked about the SMS. We talked about uploading roadside inspections, how it can impact your scores, your basic scores. Talked about trying to get some of your data corrected if it was ever needed. Now we come to the FMCSA, the investigation part. Now I'm with the FMCSA. That's why it just says FMCSA. State Police Motor Carrier Division. Several motor carrier officers. Also a couple state police investigators. Marcia Linebaugh, or she's over here. Oh boy, I don't know what that was. Marcia's been over here, but there's a couple out of the that work the Ionia scale and stuff like that. There's sergeants that work out of there. Rockford area. So this is a busy area, kind of like Detroit. So there's plenty of motor carrier officers and then investigators that also do the same work that we do. So there's different reasons we can do investigation. I'll touch on that briefly. There's the different types of investigations that we can do when we come into your company. There's stuff that, what do we look at? There's a rating that can come out of the investigation when we come to your company. And then there's the consequences of an investigation. So some reasons for the investigation to take place, like I said earlier, would be your roadside performance. Or you guys getting certain inspections or getting enough inspections, and then you hit a certain level in our system, and then kind of the red flag or the triangle, I would say, scores you, and it says, hey, there might be an issue. We have to go in and do an investigation. There's also, if you've had an investigation before, there's previous investigations where we will go check out unresolved violations. Critical or acute violations are the most egregious or worst violations that can be found during an investigation. And that's what we will go, have some of those, we will do a check a year or two later to make sure they've been fixed. There's also safety initiatives, or strike forces we do. We just, actually a couple months ago, we had our headquarters ran a list of drivers that have unsafe, that have a lot of unsafe driving violations. When I say a lot, I can't remember what professional means. And then we look for carriers in Michigan that employ these drivers. We would go to the company, extremely focused review, and we just make sure, one, we look and we employment application, see if the where the previous stops were. We look to see if you, just to see if it ran the pre-employment screening, because the unsafe driving one, which is a very common one, unsafe driving is one of the strongest predictors for future crashes. And when I say unsafe driving violations, that means speeding, that means lane changes, that means following too closely, improper lane usage. That's just a couple of them off the top of my head. So strike forces like that we'll do. I'll touch on it in a second, but we do strike forces based on the drug and alcohol clearinghouse. We see drivers that are prohibited in the clearinghouse. This is super common. They're prohibited in the clearinghouse, but yet they have an inspection after the date they're prohibited from a company in Michigan. Now contact the company and say, hey, you're hiring so-and-so. That's another strike force. They're prohibited in the clearinghouse. We find out they didn't run a query. They didn't even check the clearinghouse, but they hired this driver who has a positive test on their record. So that's another kind of strike force. We do complaints. We get complaints all the time. Probably 80, up towards 90% of the complaints are dismissed. I get it. I'm the one that myself and another lady in the office reviews pretty much every complaint that comes through in Michigan. A lot of it's disgruntled drivers. A lot of times the drivers deserve to be fired. A lot of times the drivers didn't deserve to be paid because they ruined the trailer and you took their, whatever the deposit you gave. It's stuff like that. Sometimes it's lying, but it's also sometimes drivers will send us log books and say, look what this made us do. I ran this off, so we'll go in and do a review based on that too. My Michigan State Police, they have different, they have their own kind of safety initiatives too that sometimes they'll. A high profile crash, we will go into, take a look at that company, whether it's on-site or off-site, depends. And then there's congressionally mandated investigations. Any motor coach company, we need to do and give them a rating every 3 years. We have to go into that. And then any company that requires a hazardous materials safety permit, they have to have a satisfactory rating every so often too, just because of the product they're getting. So that's mandated by Congress. So this will be real quick and easy here. And stop me if I'm going too fast. We just got a good amount of information here. I hate to keep you. I just want to get through it all. But, if there's any questions you have, we'll need to stop again. Just stop. Comprehensive investigation is kind of like it says. It's comprehensive. It's the entire look at your whole company. Those ones we would go into. Usually, if we looked at, if I ran your guys' ran a prioritization list. And they have multiple basics over, like 407 or 5 or whatever it is, or they have a history of violations across past investigations. Focused investigations are the most common. It's just like it says, focused. We're focused literally only on roadside data says you guys have problems. We're going to go in there either on-site or off-site or a mix of both. It will always start as the offsite. We'll contact you, talk to you. This is what's going on. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a letter via email, and then you can start uploading documents into our system, which might lead me or an investigator to go on site, actually look at some of your. But focus by far is the most common investigation there is, and our goal is not to come to bother you guys as far as like you can't operate anymore. We're going to send you stuff. That's what we do. Part of it also, we're going to send you a request. And when you have time in the next week or so, you can documents. So we're not trying to slow you down. We're not trying to stop your business from operating. That's really the goal. At the same time, though, making sure you guys are compliant. Whatever the data is saying. Then there's terminal investigations. That's really large companies, the very large companies that have terminals throughout the United States. My counterpart in North Carolina might do a terminal investigation on Gordon Foods. I don't know if you have a terminal lead there, but they may do a terminal investigation where we just look at just that terminal because of certain runs or because of certain drivers, or sometimes there's a complaint about the terminal. So we can do those also instead of the entire operation. FMCSA does not have any kind of criminal. We cannot come after anyone criminally. All we can do is we can fine them. So if we go to a company and there's issues, just send you a bill. There's nothing we can do criminal. If there is criminal activity, we then pass it on to the OIG. They will look at it. It's all our Investigate each time. We look at operating authority, levels of insurance, driver's license, or red flag drivers. Every time we do all those investigations I explained, we do those 4 things on every investigation. Red flag drivers now, there's a list of like, I think it's like 20 or so. Those are violations at the roadside where they're pretty bad. They're the driver's placed on service for no CDL, driver's placed on service for drugs on him or her, drunk, whatever it is. That hits our system and it stays in our system. It stays to public for 12 months. It stays in our system forever. Now, will we look at it if it's 3 years down the road or something like that? Probably not. But it's just that's what we check for when we do an investigation. And those can be. This is one thing that a lot of companies don't know. Those red flag drivers, the violation could have occurred for another company that they worked for 6 months ago. So that's another reason to run that pre-employment screening. You're hiring a driver, you might have had a red flag driver. Does not mean you can't hire them. A lot of times it's taken care of. We get there, yes, the CDL is expired. The most common thing is, and you guys probably all know, especially during the COVID time, drivers couldn't get to the Secretary of State. They couldn't get the medical cards there. So their driver's license were downgraded. Now the state for a while, they're having an exemption of not doing downgraded. They are doing it now, but we're still seeing it where drivers go, shoot, I still have logged in. So now they're getting stopped and they are downgraded to the chauffeur's license. They need a CDL. So that's a common one, but usually it's fixed like that, the same thing, exact same thing. As soon as it's fixed, it's an honest mistake usually, unless the carrier has a huge history of it, and then we move on. Depending on the type of investigation, then we will include the rest of these. We can include the driver qualification class, we can hours of service. Again, it's a focused investigation. It would be like a common focused one is maintenance, hours of service. Those are the common violations. So we go in there, we just do a maintenance review. We look at your guys' hours of service and then look at all of that. Make sure you get proper authority, proper insurance, stuff like that. We run all your guys' CDLs or chauffeurs to make sure you have the proper license. The types of violations that may be found, like I said, acute and critical. Acute and critical are the most severe. They may affect your safety rating. They generally result in civil penalties. Acute pretty much always result in civil penalties. That would be a common one. Would be any CDL company is required to have a drug testing program, even though they did not have a program. That would be an acute violation, and that would be most likely a civil penalty, unless there's some other circumstance. A critical violation is a pattern. That would be hours of service. We looked at, we only have to look at a sampling. At a huge company, we're not going to look at all. Largest sampling is 27 drivers. So for 4,000 driver outfit, we look at 27 minimum, we may expand a little. If we hit 10% of any, like an hours of service violation, those are critical violations. But there has to be 10%. So if you do have one problem child, one driver that's kind of pain, or just doesn't get it, or didn't have a ZLB, as we see a ZLB turned on for a week or so, well, it might not make it to 10%. We're going to go like the violation. Now we can get a critical pattern. Usually we wouldn't do anything unless it's a critical pattern. And if it hits a critical pattern, then it again may affect your safety rating. So, and that's what we'll get next slide, safety rating. And then there's your typical non-critical. That's not having the tire size and VIN number on the maintenance file or something like that. Something, not having the medical, not having the driver application. Really small stuff. Just like it says, it's not critical. It's not almost never going to result. Appendix B is where you're fine. Appendix B is where the explanation of the safety rating. Based on how many violations you have, it takes into account and that's what will spit out your rating. And there's the ratings. If satisfactory is the best, that's only if you have a comprehensive review. If you guys have a focused investigation, you cannot get a satisfactory, but you can get a conditional or unsat. And that's because if you have a focused investigation and you have certain violations, even if you had a comprehensive, you had a full one, you would still get a conditional rating. But the only way we can give you a satisfactory is if we look at your entire company. That's only way they allow us to give you a satisfaction. So usually focused, like I said, it's the most common, usually focused are non-rated or unrated. No rating for both. You don't have enough violations. Even one acute violation will not give you a rating. So when we walk over there unrated, you might get civil penalties, you might not. However, if you ever do have a adverse safety rating, you guys can submit, and I know a lot of insurance companies do this. You can submit a safety management plan to us, and then we take a review it, we see if there's corrective action. That's basically promising us to fix it, and then showing us some proof, and your rating is either it's brought back to what it was before we walked in the door. You didn't have a rating, you're going to be just going to be expected nothing. So that's I always, carriers call me and kind of flip it on about their safety rating because it doesn't affect their insurance. I know that, and their brokers who are using it. I just remind them about the safety management plan. They can submit it. They can submit them all day long until they get it. Not a one-time thing. The safety rating is issued when first of all, a carrier, I don't know if there's any intrastate involved in here. I'm sure there is. Carriers that are just in Michigan. If it's an intrastate company, you will never get a safety rating. You're registered for that. With the one exception of the HazMat safety permit, you need a rating. So you will get. Again, yep.
I'd like to go back to that previous slide,
Sure.
with the all that. I've had a client, okay, that was involved in an accident, and it happened to be a dump truck, a super qual. And so as you know, those are pretty big dump trucks.
Oh, yeah.
And it ended up being a fatal for the person that rear-ended that truck. And when I looked at the SMS score, it showed that it had 2 violations. One was for having a flat tire, and the other one was for having a compromised axle. So to me, at least the axle was probably pretty critical. So wouldn't that show that that truck had no business being on a public road, even though it wasn't their fault that the accident happened per se, because the guy behind was in a small compact car and was distracted using a cell phone and ran right into the back of that truck. I mean, I get that part, but the part is that, to me, in my opinion, that truck should have never been there in the public road in the first place. So why didn't the MSP issue a citation for that?
Well, I can't answer for the roadside officer why they did not. They should have, in my opinion.
Mhm.
However, the one thing I can immediately think of is in crashes, a lot of the, like I would have thought maybe the axle of that popped tire had something to do with the crash. But then they hit the, maybe not. So when there's an inspection and that comes from a crash, when it gets uploaded, there's a spot that says, there's a column that says, it basically, it's at fault or due to the crash, yes, no, or you, I think it says on the side. If it's you, or if it's yes, that means that, so there wasn't a violation, there wasn't an issue or defect prior to the crash, so when it's uploaded, it does not impact your scores. I know that's not really answering your question there, but state police, when they're at the roadside, they are our counterparts, but I don't know why they wouldn't. I'm not sure why they if they can prove, that's the only thing I can think of is that maybe they didn't know it was a crash. Probably not.
No, the only thing you saw was a little bit of paint from the other car. It didn't even put a dent on the box of the vehicle.
So that's and then the way you kind of, I've heard that's like attorney speak right there. If this truck wasn't on the road, that person would have died. So then there's lawsuit probably. I don't know. That truck shouldn't have been on the road because there's an accident. That's something we all have to think about. That's an excellent point. And when you go pull up this company who was involved in a crash, who had seen that fault, and then you go up and look, because I get all fatalities emailed to me, and I'll just take a look at the company and sometimes, most of the time, it's not the truck. Start to look at it, whoa, that company scores are pretty darn high, and the truck was out of service, and now that will be another reason for us to go contact the company. So I always say, make sure it's not your fault. Your T's got to be crossed, your I's got to be dotted, no matter what, as things happen. That specific one, though, the only thing I can think of is
Yeah,
right.
that's all good.
No, we're not. I don't want to. So real briefly though, we'll give a safety rating to any interstate carrier long as they have the amount of violations that affects the rate. We will, can't give it to intrastate companies. Again, focused investigation only if it's less than satisfactory will a rating come out of it. And the majority of them. Investigation. Six that were in my office. State has like 18, or 17, give or take. Bunch just retired, so I think the full load is about 20. Again, I covered this already. You could, if you get a rating, you can upgrade. You can upgrade it, spin it to my office and the Midwestern Service Center of Chicago, Illinois area. Get it upgraded, you'll get it vacated, you'll get it back to wherever it was before. Acute and critical violations, if you have some of those on investigation, they are public for a year. Anyone can see that. When, just say you have a big triangle, you'll now be just like it look just like if your data based on roadside hit a certain threshold. But if you have an acute or critical, it'll say serious violation and have a triangle. Public for a year, forever for enforcement side until we go back into the company to check on it. It'll stay there. So whenever we go back in, whether it's 5 years later or whatever, we will then check on that previous critical acute. Enforcement can come out of it. State police write tickets to you guys. Federal government, we mail you what we call notice of claim. We don't write tickets. Federal enforcement for interstate violations is much more severe. And then what you had if you had passed the violation, really, really severe as far as finding them. Carriers can be placed out of service. If you do get an unsatisfactory rating within 60 days, if you don't get it lifted, you're going to get placed. You will not be able to operate anymore. Interstate commerce. Do not pay the fine. You will be placed out of service also. And that's a small portion of them. I just tell you, put it up. That's a small portion of the company. A lot of companies that do it will walk out the door. Those problems. But as you guys know, or you probably know, that does happen. This right here, is anyone familiar, and everyone familiar, I should say, with the portal account? Have you ever heard of the portal account? Okay, I don't know. You said no, and the thing is, a lot of companies, it's not super beneficial to them. I don't know what kind of company you work for or whatever. So I don't. You're not really an overroad. It's a portal very often, but if you don't have a portal account, you need to have one if you're kind of over the road or you have lots of drivers on the trucks on the road. Because this is nothing, all this information is, I mean, this is what I look at every day. And it's what I'm looking at is nothing more, it's nothing more than what you already have access to. I can walk into a company and I can ask them about all these different inspections, I know their name, I know everything about it. They're like, oh, they didn't know about it because they don't have a portal account. We're not looking at anything more daily than what you guys could be looking at. You can't look at other people's information and drill down to, see driver name and all that stuff, but you can your own. You can really drill down. So if you don't have a portal account, you need to do that. And another thing you can do with the portal account is you can update it. Every 2 years, you have a DOT to update your registration information. You do it right in there. There's other things you can do. You can do the PreImplementation Screening. This is what the front of the portal account looks like. Again, you go there, you have to drill into, and now this is my view, this is enforcement view, but there is like when if a carrier calls me and has a question about the portal, I just put company view, and then I would put in your DOT number and I can see exactly what they're seeing. Put it together. So it's something to do and something you really want to do. You won't have the same access to the systems I have, but you can do your reading in there. Your drug and alcohol clearinghouse is associated with it.
Yeah, but a question on that. So we recently hired a fleet manager and he requested access to the portal.
Okay.
And when I log in, I can see his request, so the pending account request. But I can't approve the portal, just times me out. Is there a way that we can get him access? He's trying to.
It's just pending, huh, right now?
Correct. So I've tried multiple times in the last few months.
Oh, really?
The pending is still there, it just times out. I have just given in my login information.
Because he wants, oh, so you do have access to it.
Correct.
Okay, I got you.
His request is just pending.
Let me, so I can answer that problem. I can probably get you some help if, shoot me an email, like your DOT number or something. I think it's actually handled for the same people. I would, FMCSA tech support runs the whole. And I think I can get you in contact with someone that can help you. At the end, I have my email. That I can, if not, I'll give it to you. My business card. We'll get that, try to get that resolved for sure. So yeah, the portal account, pretty much last thing about that, yeah, it's a great thing to do. You can do all your updates in there, you can check out all your inspections, you can do the PreEmployment Screening, your drug health, clearinghouse. Definitely get a portal account. And then speaking of the clearinghouse, the drug and alcohol clearinghouse, this has been in effect now for hard to believe, January. Started coming down, started gaining momentum back in 2016, and I talked about it, and then kicked the can down the road a little bit, and got pushed out a little. Finally, it's here. Now it's been in effect for years. So this is something that is required for motor carriers to do that have CDLs. If you don't or not registered for this, it's actually not that uncommon still for companies not to be registered. They either, I don't know if it's companies don't take it serious, or there was some really big issues, but I mean, it's a huge clearinghouse, so there was some issues with people registering and not registering properly. But if you're not registered, there is the website. If you go to our FMCSA website, which is a huge site, any of this stuff we're talking about today, it's all public information. You can just put there and throw it out on the clearinghouse and search it. It's its own website.
Okay, sorry, that's CDL only, not for.
Right, CDL only, yeah. Do not have a CDL, do not need to register. Okay, next slide. This is just, and this is old, old stats, a year old. It was just, I meant to update this, but it was just to let you know the sheer size and volume of data that's coming into the clearinghouse. The 1.9 was, this was back in May of 2020. So 1.9 million were registered. Now it's got way to double that, probably close to. There was 237,000 plus employees registered, 61,000 positive for marijuana, which is the most common still to this day drug that showing up in the clearinghouse. And then there's 57,000, over 57,000 drivers prohibited in the clearinghouse, for whatever reason. One thing I want to point out that's pretty important, here in Michigan, marijuana, recreational marijuana is legal, but it is not legal for CDL. The federal government doesn't even observe that whole thing. Nothing has changed, and I don't know when or if anything. So that's the case. Well, how many states now? Majority of states it's legal now. So what's that? At least half, yeah, okay. So that's something just to keep in mind. We get that all the time, and that's going to keep happening. It's going to be a problem. Drivers keep popping positive for marijuana. Have a CDL. You need to let your drivers know. And nothing's changed because of it becoming legal.
So you guys are just testing the detection of AC not impaired. Can't test for impairment.
That's correct. Yep. Yeah, they're just, if they're not testing now, and that's a whole other thing. It's not impairment.
Yep.
We're just testing for system at all. And it's a six panel drug test, opiates. That's it. Well, those are all. So, and if the driver gets into the clearinghouse, which they hear about every day, talk to drivers. It's not the end. I mean, it's not the end of the world. They made life very difficult for themselves all of a sudden, but they can do the right thing and they can get back driving. Because I know the driver shortage is terrible right now. There's probably there's a ton of good drivers in there that pop positive for whatever they call it. That can do the right thing, and then they do that. If you guys have drivers that, I don't know, everyone has different policy, but if you have drivers that get into the clearinghouse, there is. You don't know, you can reach out to me. We can They just gotta go through the SAT process, they have to try to get tests. They take a lot of tests over the next couple of years. They can continue their effort. Here's the queries you gotta do in the clearinghouse. You have to do annual queries annually. That would be a driver that was with you for more than a year. You have to do a limited query. The annual query, excuse me, is considered a limited query. It's a hit. You put Matt Favory in the clearinghouse, my name and my CDL number, and it comes back whether or not I'm in it. So if there's a hit that I'm in there, and now you have to do a full query, which is also what the pre-employment query is. The new drivers you guys hire, you need to do a full pre-employment query to see if any driver, your driver is in it. And then if there is, they're in there. A lot of times they're in there and it's, they had an issue down the road, but now it will say it's going to take, everything's listed, the dates, tells you the date it was taken care of, and it will say driver, either driver now.
Working with your medical provider, are they entries? Which jurisdiction?
So depending on what the, if a company is required to enter very little, it's mostly the MRO, the medical, whoever the lab tests, it does the test, and the results are handled with the MRO. They confirm everything. They'll reach out to the driver and make sure the driver's not on a prescription. Doesn't have, it's all entered in the MRO. Then if there's a positive test, and I have a bunch of information on this, you need to do our presentation just on the clearinghouse, but if the if the driver is positive, the MRO will show up and say prescription food, and then they will not enter it into the parent. They can want to do not a positive test, as long as they have valid prescriptions, stuff like that. The MRO, that's what they do all. The carrier, the most part, enters, a order carrier would enter a refusal. Send a driver to go down, they drug her up all test, they just don't go. Well, no one's gonna even know what happened except for you. Or you would enter in any kind of observe test. If somebody comes in, something like that, you would enter very little. The majority are pre-employment or random tests that be come up. Again, you're required to do it annually. If you have a driver that's been with you since this was implemented, you may never ever do a full query on the driver because they've been with you since before it was implemented, and then you just have to do the annual. But whenever you get new hires, now at this point going forward, you got to do a pre-employment query. It is required in addition to your pre-employment program. So do that too. When in 2023, you guys will no longer be required to reach out to previous employers to check on, like right now, if you're hiring a CDL driver, you need to see if they had any positive tests in the previous 3 years. 3 years. Sorry. Try to remember all that stuff best I can, but yeah, 3 years. So when that makes sense. When 2023 hits, that's why we no longer have to do that. So you're not going to be required to do that in the driver as far as under the driver qualification requirements. You just have to do the pre-employment query. That's your previous. That's your previous.
Is there a thought with your 5 things?
So I don't know about that. That's a good question. That would be a good thing. But it is tied. It for sure is tied to your CDL right now. So if I run a driver's license, or if you guys run a MDR or whatever like that, it's going to say they're prohibited. But I never, because you know what? I don't have to run a prohibited driver. It might be already because you're using a license. Because I can run the pre-employment screen and I'll see it. That might be already. I don't know. Okay, slides. Okay, yeah, some of the common issues is right here when, like I said, a lot of people aren't enrolled still. Employers are registering as a third-party administrator. They register as the drug screen. But Drug Screens Plus has to register to take care of if there is positive, or excuse me, if a carrier is using them and wants them to be able to report for them, then that's how Drug Screen Plus or Holy Services, how they would report for you. They have to register, and then you have to request them clearinghouse, but we get employers registering as one. Need to register as an employee. Sometimes, and I don't think it's, I think it's all, most of the stuff fixed. They couldn't designate the third-party administrator. They couldn't purchase a query plan to run the queries. Then the employer's registered as an assistant, not as admin. Admin is the one who has all the roles. And then employer is registered as a driver. That's another one.
So Matt.
Yep.
You know, you had mentioned earlier that law enforcement, such as Michigan State Police, they're the ones that write out citations. You guys put out notice of claims. This is a requirement that they are registered, and if they don't register, and you've already mentioned that, some of them haven't even registered yet. So what's the stick here? Did you guys don't issue penalties, right? Or do you?
We do.
Oh, okay, all right,
Yeah. Our agents, FMCSA,
right,
we do fine. We issue fines.
okay, that was good.
So that, and
All right,
and
so I
for,
misunderstood.
for this, oh yeah, so if, yeah, we issue, we don't have any, we have no authority to do anything criminally. So we can issue civil penalties. That's what we define. We are now issuing, actually, when something comes up that's brand new, we have enforcement discretion. Some of my employees are jerks, but some of, not me, you know, it's like, not everyone's a jerk. And I get it. It's like, sign up for it, or when I call you, you're not signed up. By the time we go in there next week, be signed up. You're gonna be fine, you know? We had discretion over this for the last 2 years or something, but now they're kind of saying to us, here's when people start signing up. Here's an example. We probably should have found out, probably deal with it later this week. A company, we went in there in 2021, they weren't registered. Then we went in there, we actually just went in there last week. And they're still not registered, plus they have a driver who is prohibited and was working for a different company. He hired the driver and the driver got stopped, so the company did. Still wasn't registered, so now it's like, we gave you your chance. So that's how a lot of we're not gonna just give you a fine all the time. Usually there's some history, some severity, like the driver was prohibited, he had positive testing 6 months, and then you aren't registered, didn't run a query. So we're doing a case on the company, and it's, you know, something like that. That's one of the smaller ones. It would be $2,000 or $3,000. I'll tell you that much. When it's free to register, we should have just done that. You know, you got to pay for the queries, but it's free to register. Same, you know, under the same breath there, we will do a driver case, because that driver knows they're positive. So we do enforcement against drivers. Same thing. Fine too. Okay, so this, and I put a little pamphlet on your guys' desk right here. It's very high level, just basic information about the crash preventability termination program. This is for those crashes, because the crashes that you guys, that pops up on your guys' profile, that, like you explained, it was not the carrier's fault, but it's still, it's a reportable crash, almost killed. It gets uploaded into our system, and it does affect your score. All crashes affect your score, except now we started this program, but you have to do it. We won't do it unless the carrier initiates. You can have certain crashes, there's certain eligible crashes. I think there's 16 eligible crashes, and they're pretty specific. So that's the first part. You got an eligible crash. You submit a request through data queues, and that's where I talked about data queues for the inspection data, but you also can submit it through, or excuse me, also this is where you can submit a determination. It's for a crash preventability determination. Submit it through data queues also. The FMCSA reviews it, and then the FMCSA makes a determination. For the next slide there. The few things that we need to know is that a police report is absolutely, so you can't submit a crash report unless police accident report, it'll be immediately thrown. Don't even look at it. This is not an issue anymore, this date. The reason we had that date there, because when this thing got implemented, we weren't retro, we were crashes were correct. It had to be from that, this whole year, August 1st of 9.
So you're saying you did.
No, it'll be thrown, it won't even be reviewed, it'll stand in record. If there's a fatal crash, you need a drug and alcohol tests for the driver, post-accident test. So that case right there, that's it. Fit it to us. For some reason that driver, because that driver is required to get a post-accident test, even though they weren't at fault. That's the reason. That driver pop positive, automatically it's keep it. Anytime that happens, or if the driver didn't have a CDL, was in a CDL vehicle, driver, even though it wasn't your guys' fault on the road, shouldn't have been. Some of the suggestions you can submit, there's all kinds of stuff you can submit. Insurance documents, insurance write-ups are great. You can submit videos, dash cam videos, pictures, all that stuff can be submitted. Brittany, that turn for those right now. And I just was told yesterday, they said average right now is 80 to 85 days, which might seem like a lot, but it's really a little. But at one time, it was like a year. There's actually a good amount of people where there's so many crashes coming. So what will happen is if you get a crash, right? Next slide. Oh, well, I kind of touched on that, but if you get a crash that's removed, let's say you have 4 crashes and you get 2 removed. You go into your portal and you look underneath your crash basic, you'll see it breaks it down. You'll still have a score based on your 2 crashes, but the other 2 will be listed. It'll just say you'll have a not your fault. The crashes will still be listed in there, affect your score. That's one thing that it used to not be like that. I agree. You get a lot of the crashes, not your fault. Because we do take a look at your guys' scores, that's some of the company do. Like I said, it must be, crash types. There's some specific crash types that are in there. Rear end, that we hit up some of them. Side, car, deer, stray, stuff like a drunk driver hits you. You are ever involved in a rear end or something like that? That's, and we get them, but like rear end, it's not like you're not going to get any cash removed. So that's not eligible. Oh, yeah, here we go. Wrong direction, legal turns, cars parked illegally on the road. Some of they're really some of the obvious ones. Medical issues, the driver falling asleep, distracted driving. That's pretty common. The cargo equipment debris in the road where someone runs it over, the truck gets tore up, the radiator gets tore up, it has to be towed. Well, it's a crash by definition. But you can get that removed. Animal strike. You hear all the time the deer blown. Moose up north. Some of them take their own lives. Unfortunately, that was much. And then, what is this one? Wasn't one of the crash. Seldom occurred. Yeah, there's something that's the end catch-all, the last one. Yeah, someone the skydiver falls over the sky or the airplane falls. So you submit it again, have the police report before you do it through data queues. One other thing, real quick, what data queues, if you ever had a driver that something was one driver right now who was possibly submitted to, or his test was submitted to the clearinghouse. Incorrectly, shouldn't have been. Drivers can use data queues too. That is the system for all challenges, all data, driver company crashes. So the driver can challenge if they see some data that they don't know if that's what they clearinghouse. Some things that are coming on the horizon. Medical cert. The medical cert is going to be currently how it works. You guys are probably all aware, but the medical examiner, the ME, does the exam and then gives it to the driver. It is reported to the FMCSA also, but there's no connection right now between FMCSA and the Secretary of State drivers. But starting in 2025, that moved. Stick with that, dude. So a little ways down the road. Medical examiner is gonna submit it to our agency. We're taking the driver right out of it. So it's gonna go from the medical examiner to our agency to the Secretary of State. That's gonna eliminate the problem I said earlier. Drivers, you guys have these drivers that need a medical card, you're so darn busy, you can't keep track of whether or not or to the Secretary of State. But you realize that when he or she gets stopped in 6 months and they didn't take it there because their license is down, that's gonna hopefully eliminate that. The Secretary of State's required to do that of these drivers. Make sure they're valid, they follow the medical. Examiner was registered, but they're busy as heck. It's one person sitting behind a desk that has a stack of medical cards, and we're only required to do 10%. You guys want to make sure that the driver gets it. Goes to the Secretary of State, does it, and make sure they use it. Medical examiner that is on the national register. Coming also in 2024, I think it is. The automatic, the CDL is now, this is where the CDL is going to downgrade if a driver pops positive and goes into the clearinghouse. CDL, the Secretary of State in Michigan would downgrade their license if they are, because they're no longer qualified to drive. Or the Secretary of State will not renew. They're going to start, basically, it's going to start communicating with the clear. They won't issue a renewal, issue an upgrade, or transfer CDL across the country, as long as that driver has a positive or is prohibited in the clearinghouse. They will remove it, and they give them 60 days. They will remove their CDL privileges if they don't get it taken care of. So they can go through, like I said, once they're in the clearinghouse, they don't have to, their career is not over, it just made life difficult for them. So that's something that's coming to the Secretary of State is going to check and make sure that drivers have CDL. There's a lot there, kind of went pretty quick, so you guys got something out of that. I don't know if you want to do some questions now, or if you kind of asked as you went. I thought my email was there, Brittany, I'm sorry with that.
I can look it up too.
Because I guess, and say, well, I can tell you, my email is Matthew, M-A-T-T-H-E-W. Matthew, M-A-T-T-H-E-W. Bakery, that's F. He is a boy. R-Y at DOT.gov.
And I have one last question.
Yeah, sure.
And that is, load securement. And I would assume that the MSP, their officers are trained to be able to. And, you look at a typical roll-off truck, and, well, I can see, it seems like 90% of them never have their tie down. Here, they're just relying on the J-book to hold that roll-off position. But once you lose control of the vehicle and you do like real roll-off, that roll-off is gonna roll off.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, oh yeah.
So why do they tolerate that? Or, I mean.
Why, yeah, I know what you, I don't have an answer for you, but I know, yeah, it's a great question.
I mean, they pull over people for not wearing seatbelts. That's an
I know.
easy sign to see, and
I know.
to see not having a.
So that's, yeah, the
Tie
load
down.
securement is unfortunately, or fortunately, it's like, absolutely. Hey, I have a question for you. It's like load securement is something that we don't get. It's our regulation, it's Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulation, 93. But we do not, that's 100% state police.
Right.
Well, I shouldn't say 100%. We do, some of our people do professional state. They're the ones out on the road looking for that kind of stuff. I don't have an answer why that's there. I can see if there's anything coming. The state police is constantly trying to teeter with the load issues and all that, and change it, make it more secure. But yeah, I can see what there's anything more coming.
I know they seem to pay more attention to the low securement in terms of trash blowing out.
Oh, right, not something
Because they don't have that cover.
I know.
I've noticed over the last couple of years, the state police are issuing a lot of citations like first thing. And it goes on their SMS record. It can be challenged and it can be. Regulating that.
No, that is I will definitely see where they're setting that That is something I've been hearing for years. I don't know why they do that. Well, they do it because they don't, so I'm not writing you a ticket. I'm not gonna give you a ticket or whatever, but I'm gonna give you a warning, but you can't challenge it. Which, what do you want? Would you like a ticket or do you want?
Where, when I work, damn tickets, so you know, it's.
See, that's, yeah, I know, usually you don't even think about that.
Penalty for him.
Yep.
Either way, it's gonna affect me as a bidder.
Get me what say, yeah, I know what you mean. I can see, if you shoot me an email, seriously, and I know that's been a major issue, and it's something they've been trying to tackle, and they have officers that get more warning, others never get warning. Excellent question. Sure.
Got a question. So you talked about interstate and interstate. If we're registered as an interstate company, the driver is interstate. Is there any difference? Is it going to be treated as an interstate case?
No, no, I mean, there is a difference. The true, we need to, we're into a company or we're at the roadside too. South Dakota, if it's not intrastate, if it's not interstate commerce, it's for federal. We only have jurisdiction over it, well, it's HazMat. But, CDL, we can, so that's that example. We can look at you for hours. If here, that driver, a lot of companies do that. So there's a spot on our registration that says intrastate CDL, intrastate non-CDL. And so it is up, yes. Company registers interstate, there could be a difference. Might have local driver. They would be subject to specific. Now, the state of Michigan, when motor carrier division kind of made it a little bit easier, changed the photo. They adopt federal regulations. A lot of their stuff is the same thing. So while federal, we don't have jurisdiction over it, but state looks like the same thing. Our service, you're still subject to and on the size of the yeah, we have the jurisdiction.
For the interstate commerce, because we're an interstate carrier, all of our drivers have to be medically certified as an interstate driver. So we have to make sure all of our drivers are medically certified with the state as a non-accepted interstate driver.
Yep.
Not intra, even though they're local drivers.
Well, they're, okay, they never leave the state, they have CDL. Oh.
But the commerce is interstate.
The commerce.
Yeah.
Yes, so that would be, that's the key.
Yep.
Real quick though, intrastate only drivers that make the commerce, if there's an intrastate CDL holder, they don't have to, they're not required to bring their medical to the Secretary of State. But now, keep in mind, they better carry it out, because it's not, the federal regulation just required interstate driving to tie their CDL. We do see that pretty much.
All right, talking about intrastate drivers, are they required, or is the state moving towards having their DOT numbers attached to their power units?
For non-CDL, you're talking about CDL companies. If you have a CDL, you need an intrastate deal.
Okay.
Non-CDL, you're not, non-CDL, you need a DOT number, you're only subject to other service. Your DOT number, it's 3, I think you need a medical card.
All right, so for example,
I'm
if I,
pulled off the top of my head, but.
yeah, so if I see, I've got several clients that are in the utilities, electricians,
Yep.
that type of thing, and they're driving these trucks that, let's say, may not need that DOT number, right, because it's all intrastate.
Yep.
But as soon as they, and I see the pencil in the rear, and I know as soon as they hook it up, now the combined weight is a CDL, they're gonna be a CDL driver, so now they're gonna need that DOT number.
That's correct.
Second, the box truck's over.
Right.
Oh, right, yeah. Based off gross vehicle weight rating or the actual weight, whatever it's rated. That's all. Some of those box trucks are 24,990 pounds for a reason.
For a reason.
And, but as soon as they get loaded, they're like 32,000 pounds in it, like that, or, yeah, You're subject to CDL regs, you're subject to drug testing now, you just opened the whole can of worms. All it takes is one inspection. You're now you're no longer registered, you're not in the clearinghouse, you're not working with the. That's, yeah. And then there's those trucks, those Sprinter vans that are running, they're 9,900 pounds. That's talking about, we don't run underneath them. They're exempt from everything. Amazon trucks, we get complaints about that all the time. Trucks driving like crazy. Got packages. You know, those big Sprinter vans, I know. But hey, thanks, yeah, anytime I can answer your questions.
Matt, you have one question from online.
Okay.
If a carrier starts using another DOT number they have for another company they own, will the first number's data follow them?
Potentially. I mean, for the right and legal reasons, no, we would just the other DOT number, and it would not follow them. If they did it because of, a lot of times companies do it because their scores or their roadside data is bad, or we have been to their company, outstanding fine, or their, adverse safety rating. They start running on their second DOT number. Usually we don't want that second one before there, but that one, the data, we call that a consolidation. We consolidate the whole. But if it's done legally, it absolutely happens. There's different kinds of companies. Our sister company, wherever they call it. This one runs interstate. Not always. They have my email, hopefully too. Maybe I'm on.
Yep, just put in the chat.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And also want to mention, I failed to mention this with Brittany, she is with GFS, right, as she had mentioned earlier. Is their North American Transportation and Safety Compliance Manager. Been with them how long again?
I've been with Gordon Food Service for almost 4.5 years.
10 years. So if you notice on the cups here, you got GFS on them, right? If you happen to have a cup with a date stamp on it, you're a winner. And then you can see Brittany and she'll go get your cancellation.
If you guys have questions from a motor carrier standpoint too, I have some business cards. You could reach out to me if you're curious how we handle things.
And I also want to mention the Michigan Safety Conference is coming up 3 weeks from now. It'll be on Tuesday and Wednesday. And on the table, I've got this flyer out here. You will not see this flyer in the Michigan Safety Conference handbook. This is something that we put on every year. It's between the 3 ASSP chapters, the Mid-Michigan, Greater Detroit, and the West Michigan chapter. We put this out. And the speaker is going to be Jason Russell. Some of you may have heard of him before. He takes a different approach in terms of security. If I can bring this back a little bit, if you know anything about the FBI, you probably heard some of those things with, what was that, run, hide, and fight. And that's after the event, right? Jason Russell's position is such that it's preventative measures. What are the signs out there? And he uses AI, and he was a former Secret Service agent protecting all the current presidents back up until, was that Clinton, I believe. And so you can see his bio on the table right there. Go ahead and grab that. And that'll be on, be speaking on the 12th. So that's the first day of the event, right at 4:30. And I know sometimes people get a little hungry, so we'll have some snacks for you, okay? So don't let that scare you where you just got to duck out after a full day's event at the conference. We'll also have our booth out there, so come and visit us. It'll be for all 3 of the chapters, putting out information and that type of thing. And then, again, for the April 26th, we have Rich Mahaney, as I talked about earlier. He's a emergency response expert. He's spoken to the Michigan Safety Conference, to our group right here at the West Michigan chapter, and he speaks all over the region. And he's going to be talking about chemical safety. Now, unlike chemical safety that you're used to hearing, he puts a different twist on things where it comes from real life experience on, all right, the standard says this, the book says this, the policy says this. when this happens now, what do? And people start scratching their heads, or they never thought about it that way and never looked at it as far as how to put in preventative measures or how to reduce the incident, that type of thing. So he's gonna talk about that. I think you guys will really like that program. And we're thinking about maybe having it more than just an hour, because he's got quite a bit of information that's really quite involved. And so with that, that ends it for now, and we'll see you next month. Bye for now.